So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Josh Cormie, Executive Vice President for Media Development in Canada. Josh, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ellen. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm doing pretty good after last night's Raptors win. It was a bit hard on the old heart, but glad to see that we got through it okay, and I'm looking forward to Game 7. All right, so that aside, really excited to welcome everyone to our Ipsos Iris webinar. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Josh, and I lead the audience measurement service line for Ipsos in Canada. But I know that you're not here to hear about me, so that's all I'm going to say on that. Before I get into the details of exactly what Ipsos Iris is, I do want to quickly turn it over to truly one of my favorite colleagues, Mario, who's going to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. So apart from being one of Josh's favorite colleagues, my role at Ipsos includes looking after all the technical aspects of our audience measurement offer globally. So I work with clients globally on designing and deploying audience measurement solutions. One of those solutions, obviously, is Ipsos Iris. So before we get into all the details about the new offer, we're just going to do a quick visit to the UK, just to set the scene and sort of explain how all this sort of started for us. So in the UK, there's a governing body for online audience measurement, which is called UCOM, and they've been working with various suppliers in the last 10 to 12 years, setting up a standard for audience measurement in the online space in the UK. So in 2018, they commissioned an independent industry-wide consultation to see what the future of online measurement is in the UK and how it should look like. That consultation led then to an open RFP, which was issued around the start of 2019. That RFP ended up in a 10-month rigorous selection process, which ended up with Ipsos being awarded as a new supplier for the new standard of online audience measurement in the UK. For us, it was something that we responded to with our new offer, with our high quality approach, because we believed at that point and still believe that there's a need for a better online measurement solution in the UK, but also in other markets. And we recognize that need, which brings us back to Canada, where we believe that the need is the same. It's the need to improve, it's the need to develop new solutions to take the online measurement ahead and forward with all the challenges that the online advertising and media space is setting up. You will hear about this approach, and I will now leave it back to Josh. To lead that presentation.
Thank you, Mario. So, as Mario referenced, we really had been hearing calls for a new tool for online measurement, even in Canada. When we were talking to clients 2 years ago, we started getting questions around whether or not we were thinking about exploring new options and whether we were going to build something for the Canadian marketplace. Which we're so excited to be able to officially talk you through the details of what Ipsos Iris is and why we think it's a better tool. But I know that asking you to even consider changing audience measurement solutions, it's a really big ask. There's a lot at stake, and we appreciate how difficult that decision is. At the end of the day, making a choice like that requires a great deal of trust. Of course, the challenge with trust is it takes time to build. I would love to be able to sit here and just say, trust me, we have a better solution, and have that be it. I know it's not that simple. So we're going to be focusing on 3 key areas that we feel are going to be important to helping build that trust with you. It all starts with transparency. We understand the importance of you knowing exactly how we're arriving at the numbers that we're reporting. And so first and foremost, that means no black box approach. You'll have full transparency into the sampling that we've done, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The targets that we're aiming for, how close we got, what we had to fix through weighting. You'll understand the models that are used to calculate the estimates, and you'll have full access to that information. We're not asking you just to take our word for it. It's not just trust us, yay. The endorsements by Vividata, and of course, you'll be hearing from Pat shortly. He'll talk a little bit more about that relationship. So the endorsement by Vividata in Canada, as well as the endorsement by UCOM in the UK. We're able to be transparent in part because we're really focused on ensuring the best possible quality. That starts with a single source panel. We don't limit it there. There's also a site-centric component to this. And through this process, we understand the importance of mobile. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail momentarily. But having that respondent level data increases the flexibility, and it creates much more potential to fuse that data with other data sets. So it starts with good data, and when you have good data, you can easily blend it with other data sets that tell a much more complete story. The third part of this is really about the collaboration. This is not about us trying to force this down your throat and telling you what you need to do. We designed Iris through extensive consultation with its target users. As well as we have a Toronto-based team, which will ultimately be led by me, who's going to work very hard with all users of Iris to ensure that it's embedded throughout their entire organization so that it has full acceptance and it's embedded throughout all those who want to use it. The interface to support that will be flexible, intuitive, and simple. On top of that, we're committing to developing Iris for Canada specifically. What do I mean by that? Well, yes, it is a global tool that is started in the UK and is rolling out across other markets, but there is room to modify and adjust as needed for each of the markets depending on the need. So the support for Canada is very strong. Now, we know that we're facing a number of challenges, and I think a lot of these challenges existed pre-COVID. The reality is that COVID simply made it all that much more difficult, and it starts with an increasingly complex media landscape. The long-term impact of COVID on media is yet to be seen, but we know, or at least it's likely that it's not going to make it any simpler. I'm sure most of you on the call are well aware of the fact that revenues, advertising revenues are down since the start of COVID. This is especially true for linear media. Digital has suffered, but not to the same extent, and in fact, projections still show growth for this year, and digital is most likely to rebound next year to greater growth. The rest of linear media is showing less potential to rebound, or at least not rebound as strongly. So these challenges are going to persist for quite some time. Of all the problems we face, lack of data isn't really one of them. There's a ton of information out there, as I'm sure you're all aware, including a lot of information that's free, a lot of information that we already have access to through current tools. So that's not the issue. The problem is, how do we manage all that information? How do we make sense of it all? How do we ensure that we're using that information appropriately throughout the organization? This term has been used a lot. I'm kind of sick of it, but I still feel it's true. COVID has been an accelerant. It's accelerated trends that had already started pre-COVID, and that's specifically true, especially true in the digital space. And so what we're seeing is an acceleration of trends that already took place, transitioning to a virtual world, in-housing, especially on the creative side, we have more and more clients bringing their digital creative agencies in-house and developing their own creative. We've seen a lot of new competitors pop up. Of course, business models are changing. The fact that I imagine most of you are working from home is a surefire indication of that. At the end of the day, all these challenges increase the need for transparency, objectivity, and trust. And that's why I think Iris is such an important tool. We want to help you get back to basics and reassert your value proposition, helping you plan, buy, and sell advertising. We think Iris is going to be able to demonstrate the value that your organization brings to the media plan across devices. So we're going to focus on smartphones, but we don't just measure smartphones. It's across tablet, desktop, and laptop. At the end of the day, it's about providing greater differentiation to improve your competitive advantage. We want to be able to help you deep dive into the data and uncover unique attributes about your brand across all the devices that people are using, ultimately helping you create better content. I've talked about this a couple of times, the idea of unifying teams. We want to make sure that the data is being embedded throughout and used through the organization. And this is really what it's all about, right? Maximizing that return on investment. That data that we provide, that improved quality and better accuracy when it comes to ad sales, planning, buying, are all going to help ensure that our budgets are being spent efficiently, ultimately that you're able to maximize that ROI. So how exactly are we going to do this? Well, it starts with the panel. A 4,000 single source, mobile first, multi-device panel. That's a lot said in few words, so bear with me while I walk through this a little bit. It starts with our passive meter, right? That is the passive meter that we use is Reality Mind. It's our global partner that we use across all of our passive panels. I believe we have some of them on the call this afternoon or for the evening, so welcome, Reality Mind. We ask panelists to download the meter across all of their devices. Now, we say all devices, but we understand the importance of ensuring that it's mobile first. Why? Well, increasingly more and more of our digital behavior is done through our mobile phones. If not only our mobile phones, at least primarily through our mobile phones. I will often be on my phone searching for something or on social media as I sit next to my computer that is on. And I still tend to go to my phone despite the smaller screens. And so we want to make sure that that behavior is reflected throughout the panel. So that's what we mean by mobile first. If people's primary device are mobile, then we need to make sure that the passive meter is first and foremost on their mobile. But mobile, of course, doesn't account for all behaviors, so we want to ensure that's also installed across their tablet, and if they have a desktop, and certainly their laptop. That is the only way to ensure that we're able to capture all of their online activity. Now, I talked at the beginning about the importance of being transparent. We know that other solutions talk about having 30, 40,000 panelists. But the reality is, and I think we've all experienced this at some point, we know that much of those people are made up of a desktop panel. They then have a smaller mobile and tablet panel. They collect all that information independently, then these panels are all fused together. And the reality is that requires a lot of modeling. And so the end output from all of that modeling ends up being a very low effective sample size. Going back to Ipsos Iris in our panel, it starts with 4,000 people. But we know from previous research that most people have on average 2.5 devices. So that equates to a 10,000 device panel, right? Then if we factor in attrition throughout the year, so we're going to maintain that 4,000 every single day all year long, but of course some of those people will drop off and need to be replaced. If I factor in the attrition and the replacements, throughout any 12-month period, we probably have about 20,000 devices. Now that's important, and that volume of data matters, and I can easily come to you and start throwing out numbers of 20, 25,000 devices over the course of the year, but rather we want to focus on the core. That's 4,000, but it's 4,000 single source with those people having multiple devices. Now, with that panel, we need to ensure that we're fully representative of the Canadian population. And so that's where an establishment survey becomes so important. Yes, 4,000 is a good sample for the passive panel, and yes, we're going to recruit nationally, ensure that that's representative. But the best way to make sure that we're fully representative of not just population distribution and age, but also device usage, how they consume media across the devices, is to have a strong establishment survey to benchmark against. And this is just one example of how we're benefiting from the strong relationship that we have with Vividata. As part of the endorsement, Vividata is providing us access to their media questions from the survey of Canadian consumers. And through that much broader data set, we'll be able to create a digital universe on which to project online audiences and to help provide guidance on our panel recruitment. And again, as I talked about before, fully transparent. We'll talk about the makeup of the establishment survey. We'll talk about the makeup of the passive panel, how close we are, and how we align those two data sets. The passive panel is key, but of course it doesn't tell the whole story. In order to ensure that we're getting the best possible data, we need to have site-centric measurement. So all of our participating sites, as well as related apps, will be tagged. Now, I know you're all on forced mute, so nobody can say, oh, but Josh, the cookies, they're becoming less and less effective at identifying and retaining information on visitors. And so, site-centric measurement is becoming less valuable. It's true, the cookies are becoming less effective, but it doesn't mean that we still can't generate a great deal of information from the tags. And on top of that, we have device fingerprinting. So even if somebody eliminates their cookie through the device fingerprinting process that we have, we're still able to dedupe and understand access to different sites across devices. That is a fairly complicated process, and so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat section, because one of the reasons why I have Mario on this webinar with me is because he's capable of speaking to that in far more detail than I am. Last but not least, the measurement of small sites. Again, we would get the tag information from the small sites, but we may not have a detailed demographic understanding of who those visitors are from the passive panel, depending on how much traffic those small sites get. So to ensure that we're getting a complete picture of the demographic breakdown of visitors, we will be offering up the opportunity to install pop-up surveys on the smaller sites. And it's true, yes, the pop-up surveys don't get huge response rates, but we don't need a lot to be able to profile visitors and add some demographic depth to the information that we would already be getting from the site-centric data across those sites. All that information is then brought together through our data science team. So we have an exceptionally strong data science team, again, led by Mario, who brings together the site-centric information, the panel data, to create people-based audience estimates. They'll deduplicate the audiences across devices and platforms, and then of course they'll attribute the demographic information. And we really believe at the end of the day that this approach will provide the most accurate and reliable data for the online industry. And it's because of that approach that we were able to get the endorsement from Vividata. And so on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Pat to walk you through a bit more about that relationship and how it came about. So with that said, Pat, on to you.
Thank you, Josh. That's an important background into the type of measurement that Iris is going to provide us. Let me take you back a little bit, because developing passive measurement is not something that you do overnight. And obviously, we've been thinking about it for some time. And I started at Vividata and had the privilege of working back in Canadian media, audience measurement, and consumer research again after quite some time working in the United States. And part of that meant that I could bring things that I'd learned around the world and working with different companies to bear on the future of Vividata. And the mandate was to turn it into a leading consumer and audience measurement media research company in Canada. That meant getting to passive digital measurement and revamping what we did in terms of consumer measurement. So we looked around the world at measurement partners that could help us. That led to the beginning of a relationship with Ipsos as our core measurement partner for currency, audience measurement, data and readership, plus consumer research. And so the calendar you see in front of you is from November 2018. We were having those conversations, and I can't remember if it was near Bay or near Yonge, but it was somewhere down below in one of our offices. And as Mario mentioned earlier, the decision to award the Yukon tender to Ipsos happened about a year later. So while we were talking about revamping measurement, we were also talking about how we get to digital. And Ipsos and Vividata became aligned in more than just traditional consumer measurement and traditional readership measurement. We started to become aligned in digital measurement. So I'm going to just move forward a little bit more. A partnership began between the trusted third-party, not-for-profit, industry-owned Vividata and a leading audience measurement company in the world that was doing audience measurement in 70 different markets, so I had considerable experience. And this means we had a nice trusted relationship. They knew what we were looking for. They knew what our board was looking for. They knew what our members were looking for. And remember, we have some 500 members. They represent agencies, marketers, media companies, all over Canada. So the partnership was definitely going to evolve. We started off with, as I said, leadership and consumer information, but we wanted to branch into digital. And for our movement into digital, the first steps were really consumer digital behavior. So we didn't need to have full digital audience measurement capability, which you just saw the cornerstones of that in Josh's last few slides. We could take a few steps in that direction, working with partners that Ipsos also worked with, like RealityMind, for example. And we could start to deploy this and get an idea of consumer digital behavior that brought us revealed behavior that complemented our stated behavior through our surveys. So this was a nice way to fill out all of our portfolio for the Canadian market and move into digital measurement and do a lot of learning. While I've worked on developing passive and digital panels around the world, most recently at Simmons in the US, it's a different ballgame wherever you go. The way people participate in a panel, how they use digital media, etc. So it's always a lot of learning, and my small team and I did a lot of learning about what happens to the Canadian marketplace. So what did we do? Well, we launched the Metrica panel just a little over a year ago. And remember, it probably takes months before that in terms of planning. Ipsos played a big role in terms of panel management and helping us with recruitment. RealityMind was our technology, so we got to know how each other works in this space. We branded our panel Metrica, and its tagline is real life measured, so we get to see e-commerce activities, web activities, app activities, and streaming behavior. And all of this could be brought together. Also, people's journeys as they were searching, lots and lots of deep data. We've been presenting that to our members for the last few months. We also then developed a portfolio of products, whether you wanted a feed from AWS or an API, so you could just look at all of this data, millions of data points coming at you every day, or whether we could refine those metrics and deliver it to you in a much more digestible framework, perhaps a report, perhaps a dashboard from BI. So we refine the digital metrics that we offer, and we provide them to you in a number of ways. We've learned how to get a representative panel by demography and geography. We also made sure that we could have a reporting taxonomy that we developed, as an industry body, as an impartial third party. We developed a reporting taxonomy that was fair. We have a research committee where we're transparent to them and get advice from them on making sure we use best practices. We also developed 3 other working groups to expand the number of people who bring us their knowledge and can review what we're looking at. And finally, we already worked on a data fusion. So Josh talked about how we'll use the SCC, the Survey of the Canadian Consumer, as an establishment survey. We have people that we're recruiting for IRIS, that we're recruiting for Metrica. We know a lot about them. That means you're taking 2 high-quality databases and bringing them together. We used a multidimensional isotonic fusion with the Survey of the Canadian Consumer. That's available today. So we've learned a lot by bringing that data together, and we know we're going to do exactly the same type of thing with IRIS, so that you have very deep segmentation possibilities, deep audience targeting possibilities. This is really where you need to be, where Canada needs to be, and we're excited to be able to bring the SCC and IRIS together. And of course, we're going to keep building out what we do in terms of consumer research. We already collect deep demographics, all kinds of media, cross media, from radio, streaming radio, out-of-home television, as you see there, retail, a huge variety of psychographics. We now introduced life events, deep product and brand usage, and of course, leisure activities of Canadians. What that means is that you'll get a complete picture of the Canadian consumer, their media habits, traditional and digital. When digital is very complex and there's a lot of information happening there. So hence you need great digital audience measurement, but you need to connect that to what Canadians are thinking, feeling, what they're buying. And the point of bringing this all together is to get that complete picture. So hopefully I gave you some background into the role that Vividata plays here in making sure that we deliver the right thing to the market. And I'm going to turn things back over to Josh now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Much appreciated. I understand that my audio has not been great. So I apologize for that. I'm not sure how to make it better. We did try all this in advance and everything, of course, worked well then. And now when we go live, I guess there's some challenges. I guess the upside is that perhaps you're hearing some, but not all. So now you're increasingly intrigued and will be more inclined to come back to me for questions. So if there is anything that's not clear or that you've missed, of course, really anyone, feel free to reach out to us. As Ellen mentioned, not only will this be sent through to all attendees, but we're happy to set up smaller one-on-one conversations or small groups, and we can go through this again and of course, answer any questions. So with that said, hopefully now that I'm back, the audio is a little bit better. And we'll keep going. So with that said, all right. Pat mentioned the complete picture. Well, when we say complete, we mean complete. So through IRIS, we actually will be reporting 50 different measures. I'm not going to be able to take you through all 50. It wouldn't be the most interesting presentation. But at a very high level, we can capture pretty much everything that you would expect us to be able to capture when we're monitoring people's online behavior. So it's not just understanding the websites that they visit, whether that be on in browser or through app, on desktop or through mobile. So we'll understand behavior across all devices, but we can understand the text and the video and the audio that they're exposed to, of course, their full demographic breakdown. We'll categorize their online behavior based on interests, so sports, food, news, and so on. We can segment that data by day of the week, weekday, weekend, some time of day work, and we can report that information daily. Say daily is about a 48-hour delay, but it is reported daily. Now, having all of that information is great, but of course it's only as good as our ability to understand it, embed it across the organization, to be able to turn it into true insights. And so in order to ensure that users got the most use, for lack of a better word, out of that data, we built a UI from scratch for all users. And when we say all users, we mean all users. So we did what we did best when we started this planning. We conducted market research. So we spoke to both publishers and agencies, and then we took into account the different users within those agencies. So for example, we learned that planners like more detail in the information that they get versus somebody in marketing probably wants more of a top line read. And so what we're looking at here is when the agencies that we spoke with and we broke down their essentially entire hierarchy, and we looked at how each level uses that data. And then we made sure that as we designed the tool, that it took into account each of those users. And we also took feedback, and we took that feedback very seriously. These are actual quotes from some of the work that we did. Perhaps not surprising that at the end of the day, they wanted a bit of everything, right? It needs to be simple, flexible. So it needs to be that we have to have the ability to customize reporting, and we need the ability to upload other data sets, and we need the ability to get a really superficial top line read when needed. And of course, we need to take into account people who use it occasionally versus people who use it more regularly. But we think we've actually managed to capture that. Now, again, I'd love to be able to sit here and say, trust me, it's great, but I wouldn't blame you if you were a little bit skeptical. So I can't prove it as much as I'd like to, but I do have a short video that I want to share with you that showcases some of the early work that we've done on that UI and how it functions. This is from the UK, so it will sound smart, which is good. I wish I had the accent. Bear with me as I set this up and get it going.
Built on simplicity, flexibility, and locality, the Ipsos Iris reporting interface covers the whole digital journey in one place. The interface takes a straightforward, intuitive module approach that has three main functions: dashboard, reports, and campaigns. The dashboard provides top-line information, tracking trends and industry changes. It will include daily data and be customizable based on an individual user's preferences. As well as showing comparative trends based on daily, weekly, and monthly data. Reports has a wizard feature that guides you through the process of generating a report. It will contain standard templates to simplify the process, and a cross-tab function for more granular analysis. You will also be provided with more metrics, more demographics, and more enhanced audience selections. Finally, Campaigns includes a planner that will evaluate media reports against delivery expectations. An optimizer helps fine-tune your media report, and a post-campaign measurement tool assesses the live campaign.
The benefits to Iris are starting to take shape. Hopefully you're able to start seeing some ideas on how this could be used. Certainly one of the things for publishers when it comes to media planning and buying is that access to more granular data really would help build compelling media sales stories about the brand, where you fit in your market, ultimately the value your brand brings to the media mix. For agencies and advertisers, the access to this data will help you conduct multi-device analysis by channel and brand, help you optimize reach and engagement with your target audience. It will also help you identify smarter ways to engage audiences online. From a marketing and strategy standpoint, it'll help you identify who your audiences are, ultimately better understand their online habits. This will help you build more compelling strategies for how to engage them. Of course, it will also help you identify new opportunities in this very rapidly changing world. And that could be around taking new content to the market, simply better intelligence to help you differentiate in a pitch, or who's best to target with a new product launch. From a research and insight standpoint, Iris will help you get a clear understanding of the online market and trends and where those trends came from and where they're going. It'll also help you identify what your competitors are doing. Simply all the information you get about your own site. Of course, you get a lot of that from your competitor brand sites as well. And help you understand how your category is evolving and changing. And of course, last but not least, from an evaluation standpoint, you'll help get feedback on the editorial content. Will help your teams understand what's working and what isn't, and help you optimize that content as needed. Of course, also as well as feedback on your marketing communication initiatives. One quick detour from Iris is that we're not just thinking about today, we're thinking about tomorrow as well. And we understand as important and as valuable as digital measurement is, that there's still a lot of questions around what about cross-media? Excuse me. Well, the reality is that we're currently running a cross-media study already, and it's built off of the same foundation as ours. So this isn't a completely new tool, using completely different technology. It's really an evolution of where we're at. The study that we're running is called Compass. That's just the name of the study, and it's for the BBC. And that's able to take into account a total audience measurement and profile users across TV, radio, internet, and across all devices. So all the same things we can do with Iris, we can then layer on top of that with TV and radio and provide that measurement. Just as a plug, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do here. It's called MediaSell Plus, and that's just a brand for it. And I'm not going to go into really any detail at all on this, but I'll just say it works by, in addition to using the Reality Mine meter to capture all online activity, it picks up audio content through your cell phone for radio and television, and then it's able to pull together that full read across devices and across channels. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, with the information that we're collecting in order to be able to provide that online measurement, we have access to a lot of information. So it's not just about measurement. As I'm sure most of you know, Ipsos has a long history of working with really the biggest advertisers in the world, helping them strengthen their brands, helping them understand their consumers, whether that be through conventional brick and mortar shopping or online behavior or understanding brand performance over time or creative evaluation, whatever the need is, we do a lot of work in that space. And so once we have access to all of this digital data, it allows us to really take what we understand about brands, marketing, advertising, and communications and strategy, and layer on top of that all of this digital information to be able to provide a great deal of insights on an ad hoc and custom basis, again, across all devices. So this is not just about measurement, it's about much more than that. That takes me through really the details for today. There's obviously a lot more I could talk about, but I wanted to respect everybody's time. And so from a timing standpoint, in terms of where we are, this is very much happening right now. We're currently engaging with the market. So some of you on this call may have already heard from Ipsos and or Vividata about Iris. We are in the process of negotiating contracts with potential subscribers, and so we're very much in this. This is real and this is happening. We're ready to start building Q4 of this year. We haven't started yet, but as you can imagine, it does take time to build the panel up, not just because of the needs to recruit, but of course also the time it takes to ensure that all subscribers' websites and apps are appropriately tagged. And so we'll be starting the process in Q4 and moving forward. In Q1 of next year, we should be ready to start offering some digital-based solutions. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if we think about the slide that I showed just previously with all the other information that we're collecting through the passive meters, we can start reporting that information prior to being able to actually share out audience measurement data. So we may not have enough to provide audience measurement information, so we're not at the 4,000 yet in terms of the panel, but we could do a lot with 1,000 people. That'll still tell us a really interesting story about a lot of things and helping our clients understand a lot about their customers, their shoppers, and how people behave online. And so we should be able to start doing that in Q1, depending on what the need is. And then by Q3 of 2021, that's when we tend to be fully ready to start reporting the audience measurement data. So we'll be collecting for 3 quarters, but over that, but we'll be actually ready to start reporting the numbers in Q3 of 2021. So I'm not going to read through the summary of all the benefits for Iris, but I will leave you with this. We think that by focusing on trust and transparency, by bringing an understanding of audience measurement, audience measurement, not just based on the current work that we're doing in the UK, but the reality is that we're already measuring audiences across different platforms in 70 plus markets globally. And we also, of course, have a cross-media measurement study for the BBC in the UK. We do believe that single source panel that's demographically and regionally representative and represented across devices, but mobile first, is a superior solution. And all this, of course, leads to, we think, better insights that will be accessible throughout your entire organization. The last thing I'm going to say is not particularly subtle, but hopefully was obvious throughout this, is we want your business. I mean, that at the end of the day is we're happy to educate and inform about innovations and new tools at Ipsos. But what we're really here for is we're looking to sell Ipsos Iris to you. We're looking to bring on new subscribers, and we're willing to take that journey with you to help build that trust and help you address any concerns and answer any questions. So if there's, I'm sure there are questions. I've seen the comment section blinking a fair bit at me throughout this presentation, so I'm going to have a look at some of those questions now. We have about 15 minutes left, so I'll use those 15 minutes to review some of these questions. We'll answer what we can now, and anything we don't get to now, we'll answer via email after the fact. So hopefully the audio wasn't too bad, especially during the first half there. And I appreciate everyone's time. Hope everybody's staying well and safe. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. So with that said, I'm going to open up the questions and see what we have. Bear with me as I have a look here. So one of the questions we had was around as I suspected would be the case, the declining use of cookies and what impact that has on our ability to accurately measure online audiences and what our plans are for the future. So, Mary, are you able to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Josh. So we were expecting that question as a first question, I must say. So first of all, this obviously comes back to the not just the sort of the increasing restrictions which are already in place in some of the platforms, browsers that people use, but also primarily with the announcement from Google that the third-party cookies will not be supported from some point in the next 2 years or something like that. Obviously, that means that this traditional method of identifying devices visiting websites is not going to be available. We don't know what will be available. We believe, and I'm sure that the whole sort of industry is expecting from these big platforms, primarily from Google, to put forward a new technology which will support similar functionality to some extent. However, at this point, we, for example, within our methodology, we use a number of different methods combined in order to identify a device visiting one of our tagged websites, and then obviously the key point, identifying that device again across any of the tagged websites. And Josh mentioned device fingerprinting, which is one of the methods we use, the core method, and the most sort of the one that brings us the most of the retention of the device information. And it is a proprietary method that we developed. Fingerprinting is something that's that exists, that many players in this space use in different shapes or form. And it is also something that a lot of platforms are trying to restrict, again, in different ways. Our method still works and produces results which are extremely satisfactory for us and allow us to track and retain the information about devices through a longer period of time. Apart from that, we are also developing some new methods on our own, as I'm sure any other sort of player in this market is trying to do. So there's an increased sort of and increasingly people are moving away from third-party data to some extent and going to the direction of integrating first-party data. And that's something we also already are doing with a number of big players in the market, such as Apple and Google and Facebook, where obviously they haven't been allowing third-party tagging for some time now. So we are looking to integrate their own first-party census data into the measurement, into the industry-supported measurement like Ipsos Iris. So having said all of that, we are still able to do largely what we want from site-centric measurement because of the device fingerprinting primarily. An example of that in one of our countries where we do this in Southeast Europe, we are constantly seeing around 20% of devices that we cannot verify and track. Everything else we can, and those 20% are pretty much all iOS devices, which already no one can track to that level. So it is something that we need to continue developing, and we will be developing as again anyone else playing in this space. But at the moment, we are able to collect the data and that data is satisfactory for this method.
Thank you, Mario. While you're there, I have another question for you, and it's a good one because I've been wondering the same thing. The Iris name, it came out of the UK. Why Iris?
That's a good question, and the answer is literally there's no reason. Well, I think we had a number of sort of brainstorms or whatever you want to call it, but with a minimum effort, I would say, from a team of researchers and audience specialists. So not very creative people. We came up with this. We liked it. We just said, let's go with it. Pretty much.
Fair enough. At least it's better than doing I something just like I track or I whatever. All right, Mario. Some questions around the MediaCell Plus.
Yeah.
Can you go into a bit more detail around exactly how the audio matching works to provide that picture across radio and television?
Sure. So MediaCell is again one of our own sort of products and proprietary technologies that we developed in the last 10 years. It was developed primarily as a technology to measure TV and radio, and it works it's an app. First of all, it's a software approach, not a hardware approach. So we install an app on people's devices, on our panelists' devices, on a panelist smartphone, and that app turns that smartphone into an audio meter, which means that the app and the phone are listening to audio all the time and sampling audio, and then referencing that audio with our database of content, where we are then able to use audio matching techniques to confirm what content have people been exposed to. Another method that's also built into the app is encoding or watermarking, depending on how we want to call it, which is a method where we ask broadcasters to embed an inaudible signal into their broadcast, and the MediaCell app is also able to pick up that as well. So we have a dual detection method. In most countries, in most markets, audio matching is the preferred choice because encoding does require a bit more work on the broadcaster side. But we have built the app so that we are able to plug in different detection methods. What we then did as well is that we've moved forward with integrating Reality Mine on-device metering into that same app, which means that we now have an ability to recruit a panel on iOS and Android and install a single app, which then can measure not just the on-device consumption of websites and apps, but then also can turn that device into a meter that can capture TV and radio data. And that's something that we have available, and that's why we call Iris Panel across media ready. Doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to switch this functionality on from the start, for example, in a market like Canada, but we have that option and we have the capability to move into that direction if the market sort of supports that.
Thank you. And now, in the spirit of transparency, as that was a theme for today's webinar, I will be transparent. This is my question. This is not coming from one of the panelists. But we talked about cross-media, but we're obviously talking about digital and TV and radio. What do we have in terms of app-based solutions for out-of-home?
So for out-of-home as an advertising medium. Mm-hmm. So Ipsos is the industry leader in measurement of out-of-home audiences, and we have a number of different approaches and methodologies which we can deploy depending primarily on the market size and the available budgets. The core method for us to measure out-of-home audiences is to deploy again a specific custom device which takes GPS information on a second-by-second level. And that's used in the UK, it's used in France, and will be deployed in some other countries in the future. That allows us to collect, again, very detailed information about people's movement. We combine that information with other data sources about people's movement, about traffic volumes, about different sort of, any source we can get in terms of how people move and the volumes of that. Other options are also, we have another app which we can install on people's panelists' phone, which then again captures location data. at a bit less granular level than that custom device. All this sort of is again available, and it's something we can deploy. Again, it starts with a scoping exercise with the market in terms of what is currently available and what the market needs. Does that
answers my question? Yeah, no, thank you. We'll keep going with you, Mario. I think a really good question. What happens if somebody's looking for access to a specific industry? So for the example that this person put forth was healthcare. What would the quality of the data be when looking at something a little bit narrower in terms of the category?
It depends. It depends what's the requirement. If we're talking about looking at specific niche sort of digital entities that people visit, obviously our panel and the idea of having a 4,000 strong panel is a decent sized panel that can cover a lot, but it won't be able to cover the long tail, obviously. So how can we measure those niche entities is by tagging, of course, and by putting our site-centric measurement in sort of putting it in place so that we can combine that with the panel insights and produce an estimate. In terms of looking at the healthcare sector in general, I think with the user-centric measurement, with the panel measurement, there's a lot of scope for us to produce to use the behavioral data we collect. And I think Pat talked about how they do it already with Metrica already now. We can produce different sort of slices of data, different segmentations. We can look at different sectors and work with the clients in terms of providing custom information which is coming straight from the panel. So those are the two options I would say.
Sure. Okay. So on that point, Pat, do you have in the data that you've looked at that you've collected already with Metrica, have you had an opportunity to dive into any specific categories, whether it be healthcare or otherwise, to understand behavior, and how has that experience been?
Yeah, and I would definitely piggyback on Mario's point. Well, when you slice into something a little bit more detailed, what you could lose if you're trying to be very precise is sometimes offset by looking at the data a little differently. Metrica, you might remember, we were just looking at the consumer side of behavior, so it doesn't have all of the things built in that digital audience measurement does with Iris. But we could pool panelists over a period of time and then take a look at what they were doing. And we did that because obviously Metrica was smaller and designed to be smaller on the consumer side. One of the things we looked at early on, because obviously the panel was ramping up and as the pandemic loomed, we saw visits and searches to Amazon and visits and time spent, and the amount that you were spending in a basket exceeded December of 2019. So it exceeded the Christmas period for Amazon. And we presented this to agencies and others that were very familiar with the Amazon business and who were able to qualify those benchmarks and say that's absolutely true. They've been in Christmas mode for some time in terms of how they're operating. So we got to see a lot of really cool insights on takeout and food delivery mechanisms and how those have doubled and quadrupled. We've got obviously to look at e-commerce in a very deep way with Amazon and in Walmart in a very, very deep way. So we're able to look at a lot of different consumer behavior with just looking at the panel and not finding any real issues. If you're looking for a specific website, yeah, you can run into more and more issues. But if you're looking for some consumer behavior in general categories, there's a lot of detail there, and you can see whether it's search, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's activity in those general categories. You can really see a lot of depth there.
Perfect, thank you. I know that we saw actually that hopefully it means people find this interesting. We saw that a good portion of the attendees still on this call, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and including our presenters. I know Pat in particular has a big meeting in 2 minutes. So I think with that said, I will again thank everybody for their time. I know there's a couple questions, especially some technical ones that we didn't get a chance to address. today, but we'll reply to those separately. And of course, if anybody has any other questions or comments, feel free to reach out. And again, I've mentioned a couple times that the presentation will be sent to everyone within a couple days. And with that said, I think we can all go on about our day.
Thank you, Josh and Pat and Mario, for today's presentation. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. There were a number of questions, and as Josh said, you will be receiving a reply by email to your question, as well as a direct link to today's recorded presentation. Remember, there are some sheets in the handout section for you to download and read more about Ipsos Iris. And of course, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you directly, so reach out to us, please. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.